All right, welcome into Ethan Skolnick starting 9:09. Our producer is Manny Chang. I saw that in the comments. I hope Ethan isn't late today. It wasn't me today. Okay. It's not always my responsibility. I'll take responsibility for what I do wrong. Anyway, we are here on starting 9, Tuesday and Wednesday, every Tuesday and Wednesday, starting at roughly 9 o'clock. Look, see, what is that? Gabriel? You know what, Manny? I don't know if Manny can jump in here, but if Manny can jump in, he can take responsibility for this one. Anyway, we appreciate you joining us. Check out the episode from yesterday on the Miami Dolphins and their coaching search. We'll do more of that as the week goes on. I might do a special starting 9 at some point, even if it's solo, at some point, either on Thursday or Friday. Today, we're going to talk Miami Heat. We are sponsored, as always, by our friends over at everythingtradeshows.com. Go to everythingtradeshows.com. If your company is going back to trade shows, which we know many are, whether it's at the Broward Convention Center or down at the Miami Beach Convention Center, the trade shows are busy again. You got to get yourself back in front of people if you've got a business. Obviously, with everything that's happened with COVID, the phone number is 954-791-8882. 954-791-8882. Make sure, again, that you check them out down here in Fort Lauderdale. They work with companies like Microsoft, Citrix, and many others. They certainly can work with yours. And again, they work with companies all around the country. So go to everythingtradeshows.com, mention 5 reasons, and they will do a booth rendering for you for free. They will show you exactly how it's going to look like. So again, everythingtradeshows.com. All right, again, the producer today is Manny Chang. The guest is Sean Rochester. He's going to be joining me here in about 10 minutes, and we're just going to talk Heat today because the Heat are back. It's been a 4-day break or 3 days in between. You don't get a lot of those here during the season. The Heat come back after another elongated road trip later in the week when they play out the second game of sort of a 2-game set against Atlanta. But tonight they're in Atlanta and they're playing a Hawks team that is struggling. They are, you look at Atlanta before this season and you said, okay, they got a lot of pieces, right? They've got Trae Young. They just got to the playoffs. They beat the Knicks. I don't know if you get an award for that. But they almost got to the finals behind Trae Young. They re-signed John Collins. They extended Clint Capella. They've got a lot of good young wings. Cam Reddish showed some things in the postseason. Bogdanovich, you were hoping he would be healthy if you're a Hawks fan. I don't know that there are Hawks fans because every time I go to Atlanta, they're all Heat fans. But if you were a Hawks fan, that was something that looked good for you. And they just haven't been very good this season. The Nate McMillan sort of magic powder has worn off. There's a lot of rumors of some frustration with Trae Young, some frustration for John Collins in terms of his role there. Seems to play better without Trae. And now they're in a position where they're struggling just to stay out of the play-in, whereas we thought that would be the only team in the division, and not that we really care about divisions anymore, but the only team in the Southeast Division that would be really close to Miami. It turns out that Charlotte has been better, and for long stretches of the season, Washington was better. And so this is a 2-game set that the Heat have got to get. I think when you look at where this season is tilting towards, okay, you already see Bam is back on the court. We still think it's going to be a little bit longer. It is 6 weeks from the injury. It is 5 weeks from the surgery. The initial ESPN report was 4 to 6 weeks. He's already out of that. We heard it was going to be 8 weeks or more. I'm going to hold to that. Maybe not from the time of surgery, but from the time of injury. So I still think he's going to be out another week or 2. Okay, that's where I'm at with that. But again, him being back on the court is a good thing. I don't think there's a need to rush him back. You're going to see Dwayne Dedmon back here in the next few days also. The backcourt has gotten a little bit deeper. Gabe Vincent is back out of protocols. They decided to extend the Kyle Guy thing, but I don't know that he's going to get a ton of playing time going forward because you've got Hero healthy, you've got Robinson healthy, you've got Strus healthy, you've got Vincent healthy, you've got enough guards, and you've got Oladipo, who's going to be coming back here at some point. Again, not one that they're going to rush. We had heard that could be back sort of in the mix December, January was kind of the projection. I thought maybe it'd be February before you really saw him take any kind of role. He's got to get back in Heat shape. Still think we're targeting that. Okay, so you're talking about a lot of players are coming back, and then Markieff Morris, I don't know. If I say anything about Markieff, he's probably watching and he's going to get angry at me again. He tweeted out soon at me that he tweeted out again, about the whole sloppy fat boy thing. That wasn't me that caused that. But now he's in the protocols, so we hope he's well. But I don't know when he's going to play. What I had heard about Markieff Morris was that they had to be careful because of where this injury was, that you don't want to cause any permanent damage, any long-term damage. Okay. So they were being exceedingly careful with it. But again, it's been like almost 3 months. And I don't know necessarily that when Markieff comes back, that there's going to be a big role for him. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about here with Sean Rochester, is that the definitions of roles have changed for the Heat from the start of the season, simply because a lot of the depth players are better than we thought. They've gotten better. There's this weird thing that happens in basketball. If you're with the right organization, you get better. Like, that's the thing that's never projected by like the national analysts or anything else. Like, the players improve. Like, you aren't always who you were when you came into the league. PJ Tucker is the best example of this. I would ask that everybody check out a really good episode that I had very little to do with. Brady and Alex going back and forth about what's been so sort of revelatory about PJ Tucker on the offensive end in particular. You knew he was a good defender. You knew that. You knew he was a good team guy. You knew he'd set screens, but like running offense through him, like, I don't think anybody anticipated that. Like, PJ, go stand in the corner and hit a three. You're good at that, but only from the corner. But he's been much more than that. Eric Spoelstra has unlocked it. Good organizations make players better. Bad organizations keep players stagnant. I was told that a long time ago. And if you look at the bad organizations, if you look at like the Sacramento Kings, for instance, okay, do we think that the Sacramento Kings have drafted poorly every year? I mean, De'Aaron Fox, I think we agree, was a good pick. But do we think they've drafted poorly every year, or do we think that guys just don't get that much better when they're with them? Like, I feel bad for Tyrese Halliburton. I think he's a really good player. I don't know that he's ever going to reach his potential there. There are organizations that just churn players because they get draft picks and those players never get any better. The best example of this was, if you went back, the Clippers, and I'm dating myself a little bit, but I mean, I date myself all the time. But if you look at what they had at one point, they had this collection of young players, these like misfits: Lamar Odom, Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson. Does anybody remember that group? And nobody really got better there. Like, it took Lamar getting out of there to get better. Then he had other issues. But I mean, while he was there, while those players were there, they couldn't win. Minnesota is a perfect example of this now. Now they're a 500 team, right? Because I think Anthony Edwards is that good. But they've churned through draft picks, and Cat's been there forever. They don't make the playoffs unless Jimmy comes and rescues them. There are just some organizations that players don't get better. And so what happens is, like, the bench doesn't really ever get crowded because those guys in the back end of the bench are playing like they've always played. I mean, Kyle Guy, another example of this, right? Like, he hasn't been with the Heat long enough, like, for the Heat, like, potion to work on him. But I mean, he's being used better apparently, because like, I looked at his numbers. Like, I didn't even know he'd played in the league, to be honest, when the Heat signed him. Okay. I didn't really know. I mean, I watched him at Virginia, but I didn't know what he'd done in the league. And then I looked at his numbers in Sacramento, and like, he's like a 23% three-point shooter. He gets to Miami and he's like, okay. And Eric is just unleashing him. He's another weapon. So what's happened now is the Heat's proficiency at being able to develop and empower players. I mean, it's ridiculous, TJ. He's 47%. He's first in the league in three-point shooting. Their ability to empower these guys, to unlock these guys, is now creating a good problem, because it's kind of hard to put them to the side. It's like, you got a lot of friends, right? And you got a free weekend and you want to see all of them, right? You don't have the kids. You're alone. You've been wanting to hang out with this person. Maybe there's some woman you want to take out, whatever. Okay. And you've got all this time now to figure it. But you don't have that much time, because there's a lot of people who are on your list. You got to squeeze it all in. The Heat have to squeeze all these players in somehow. So what we're going to talk to Sean Rochester about is how they do that. How do they squeeze in all of these players? How do they continue to empower these players when the roles are going to shrink for some of them? Gabe Vincent has an Instagram post up, joking. He's very close with Max Strus. It's obvious. He's got an Instagram post up. Look who I met today and all the rest of this. Now, I'm curious, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, are the minutes going to be the same as they were? The roles going to be the same as they were? Caleb Martin, Omer Yurtseven. So we're going to talk to Sean Rochester about that in a minute. Before we do, I do want to mention another sponsor, 5 Reasons Sports Network. This one is for endurance athletes. So you're a runner, you're a rower, whatever it is that you do, right? GetSalis.com. It's GetSalis.com. That's GetSalis.com. This is where you want to go to get your electrolytes back in your system. So, I know everybody drink the sports drink. I get it. This is much better. Like, this is targeted directly to you. It will replenish you faster. It will keep you going longer. So go to GetSalis.com. That's GetSalis.com. Use the code 5RSN. There's the website. 5RSN, you'll get 10% off. That's our product code. Whenever I mention products here at 5 Reasons Sports Network, you want to get a discount, I can go over with you. You can DM me, whatever, if you forget how much the discount is, but you'll see a plug in there. At this one, it's 10%. So go to getsalis.com. Okay, it's sugar-free, no artificial colors or flavors. All right, this is the stuff that you want to take. It is formulated for you. So we've got some people in the network who are going to be trying this, but we've heard really good things about it, and you definitely need to try it too. So go to getsalis.com. Use the code 5RSN. All right, let's bring on Sean Rochester. You can find him at Sean Rochester NBA on Twitter. There's the guy. Otherwise, he's educating the youth of America in his spare time, which seems like a more noble pursuit than joining me at starting 9. But Sean, let's get to it. You have been, I guess, cast as the Duncan Robinson proxy, the Duncan Robinson supporter. You fight the noise on old Dunk. But Dunk, we think is still in the mix here. Like, I mean, he shot, as you noted, he shot 42% over an extended stretch of time. Now the numbers are kind of getting back to where they were, but the circumstances have changed. This team has changed kind of around him. It's changed around Jimmy and Bam in their absence, where other players have taken more prominent roles. So it looks to me like they've got like 12 playable guys ultimately when this thing plays out. How do you think Erik Spoelstra, let's not get into the details of the specific players yet. We'll do that. We'll unveil it. But how do you think Erik Spoelstra will approach that generally? Do you think he goes back to we know he likes a 9-man rotation, maybe 8 in the playoffs, or do you think that he expands this thing?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think looking down the bench and having options is a blessing. Like, if you think back to last year where he looked down the bench and he had no answers, that was terrible. Like, think about those games against the Bucks where we were just like begging someone to come in, and who was it? Belly, and there was no answers on the bench. So 2 years ago, he had a little bit more creativity that he could use on his bench, and I think we have that same situation now. So, I think it's making the pieces fit against certain opponents, and I think that may cause some people to play more against certain opponents and less against others. And I think that's a blessing for us because I think it's going to help us when we get down to those playoff matchups.
All right, so no Bam still, although he's getting closer. Omer, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. Like, I mean, he has, from a raw statistical standpoint, I mean, he has stepped up in a huge way. We have been through this before with a guy who stepped up from a raw statistical standpoint. Miami Heat maxed him out. It didn't work out so well. And this guy doesn't have that guy's attitude. It doesn't appear. He wants to get better. He seems to be in it for the right reasons. But also sometimes numbers lie a little bit. In your view, how has Omer played?
I mean, he's obviously played above anyone's expectations. I mean, I think it was a fearful thing when Bam got hurt, and then when Dedmon got hurt, it was like, what are we going to do? And especially with Keith out too. They've adjusted what they've done for him. He has to be in the drop. He's not comfortable or quick enough to get up to the level of the screen, and they've made that work though, and it's kept him in a proximity of the glass, and so his rebounding numbers are obviously sky high, and that's helped keep our defense afloat. Gad shared a stat last night on the YouTube screen that over the last, I think, 10 games, Omer has the best defensive rating for the Heat. Wow. Which is one of those crazy numbers that you would, I guess like PJ Tucker. And when it was Omer, it's a product of getting rebounds. It's a product of doing a pretty good job of just kind of walling up. He's not a great shot blocker by any means, but he's getting better at being in the right spots. And I think then being around guys like PJ, being around Kyle, those good defenders kind of hide his weaknesses too.
All right, so let's look at the front court now. We're going to start to break this down by sort of group on the team. Let's look at the front court when they're all healthy. And we're assuming health for Dedmon. Bam, we know, is on the mend, right? Markieff, I don't I don't know, and I'm afraid to say so at this point. But let's assume health, okay, for all of them. Do you see any scenario where there's more than one big consistently coming off the bench?
No. I think Bam starts, even though that my timeline tells me Omer should start next to him. I'm going to start Bam at the
Yeah.
5.
Yes.
You know, I think
because it's 1998, and
yeah.
we're gonna
If
Pat would do
Spoke
it, but Eric's not
if
doing it.
Spoke could just figure out that he's a 4 like the entire timeline sees, I don't know what Spo's watching. Maybe he's
Yeah,
not
I mean
watching film.
it's crazy because
It's
this
incredible.
guy who was drafted 14th overall hasn't become anything. Playing at the 4, so I've been
He
playing at the
wonders
5,
why.
excuse me. So
Yeah.
they should move him to the 4.
He wonders why he can't win a coach of the year. I think the probably is Dedmon, but I think
Mhm.
Keefe in certain situations could be in that spot. I don't think both of them play. And
Mhm.
because like Keefe gives you a little bit more stretchability, and I know Dedmon is shooting well from behind the arc and limited, attempts, but they give you two different things. So I think against certain opponents, if you're playing a big that, let's say you're playing Joel Embiid,
Mhm.
Dedmon is probably better because of his ability to match up with him inside. He can't stop Embiid, but he's got more size to him. Whereas Markieff can stretch him out a little bit more, put a little bit more pressure on him on the defensive end to have to guard him. So
Mhm.
I think there's two different ways you could go with that. But I do not think both of them are going to be playing.
All right, so if that's the case, let's slide down a little bit. All right, so you're talking about 3 guys playing up front, which is Bam, Tucker, Dedmon, or Markeith. Omer's time comes, but probably not now. KZ Okpala out of the rotation. He obviously plugged the hole for a period of time, and that's kind of where you're at with your bigs, so to speak. All right, so now Jimmy is your 3. I guess. I mean, I never know if he's a 2 or a 3, but he's your 3. Okay, in this scenario. In most situations, does he have a true backup? And if that is that backup, Caleb? I mean, do we see a situation where Caleb still works his way into the, because Jimmy's minutes are going to increase as the games matter more, right? So does Caleb just become the Jimmy replacement?
Yeah, I mean, you see that in the starting lineup right now, where
Right.
he steps in and kind of does similar things. Not that he's Jimmy Butler, but he brings the same type of rim pressure. He attacks. He's a good defender. Plays passing lanes.
Mhm.
He's a good cutter. So I think that's sort of the replica there. I know we haven't talked about the Duncan Struce thing, but like those two mirror each other more than anybody else. Like
Mhm.
I don't think like when we talk about Oladipo coming back, assuming he's healthy and
Yeah.
able to contribute, like he overlaps with Caleb more than anybody else. I think
Mhm.
Oladipo is like a Caleb and Gabe combo. So
Right.
when we talk about squeezing minutes, I think it's those 3 that affect each other. And Struce is sort of in a different category, not just because of how he's played, but like what he brings is that outside shooting. So
Mhm.
him and Duncan to me are more tied together. Then you have Caleb, Gabe, and Oladipo that their minutes are sort of tied together. And Tyler's going to get his minutes. Like he's completely on a different island than everybody else.
All right, so back to the Duncan situation, and yeah, we got to throw Tyler in the mix too.
Yeah.
Back to the Duncan situation now, because the way it was put to me in talking to some Heat folks this week about Duncan was that the value of Duncan is not in the day-to-day shooting, and I know gravity is the word that everybody uses, but what the value in Duncan is this, that he's the one guy on the team that other teams come into the game and they're afraid is just going to beat them from 3 by himself. That essentially they're worried about the 8, 9, or 10 3-point game, right? And he had an 8 3-point game the other night. And that's not going to happen all the time. Obviously, there's been a lot of 1 for 7s this year or 2 for 7s or whatever. But that is the reason for it. Is that reason enough? And the fact that there's a familiarity level with Bam and Jimmy, is that reason enough to start him? I'm not going to get into the hero thing because I don't think Tyler's a starter in this particular mix. I think he is for his career, but I don't think he is in this particular mix. Is that enough to start him over Struce if Struce is shooting the ball at the level that he's been shooting at lately with some of the other things that Max provides, particularly offensively?
Yeah, I think, like when we talk about tonight's game against the Hawks, if
Mhm.
Jimmy's not playing, right, he's out. I
Right.
still think Struce starts because I think that fit with that group is better suited for Struce with Duncan coming off the bench. When Jimmy's back in the lineup and we're at full strength, that's when I think you go back to Duncan.
Okay.
And I think minutes wise, when you're looking at 48 minutes of those two guys, like I said, I think those two are kind of tied together. I think you go with the hot hand. Like I'm a big Duncan supporter, and I also like Struce, but if Duncan is shooting 1 of 7 on the night and Strus is hitting 5 out of 7, give him more of the minutes. Like, as an athlete, I think both of them would understand that. Like, you earn your minutes based on how you shoot and how you're playing. So if on one given night Duncan's better, Max might lose minutes. If Max is better on a different night, he might lose minutes to, or Duncan might lose minutes to him. I think that's a fair compromise for those two.
Yeah, but see what we're doing here. This is interesting because we're talking about, okay, there's basically 48 minutes with Duncan and Strus, right? Okay, and we talk about there's basically 48 minutes for Butler and Caleb, essentially. I mean, they may overlap a little bit, but there's essentially that, right? With Jimmy getting the lion's share of those. You've got essentially 90, the two front court positions. You got 96 minutes to split between essentially three guys because you know that Bam and Tucker are probably going to get upwards of 35 plus. Maybe somebody else gets in the 20s. Maybe you go smaller at times with Jimmy or Caleb as a backup 4. So maybe that creates a few minutes. But even with that, if we're going to say that you're splitting 48 between Lowry and Gabe, that doesn't even include Tyler. Like, so this is what we're talking. And that doesn't even get into Oladipo's return. But Tyler's getting 30 plus, right? So it still feels like, again, we're kind of moving these pieces around and these chairs, right? This is musical chairs. There's still gonna not just one, but two, maybe three guys who are left without a chair, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing this down before we got started, I have 7 guys for 4 spots off the bench: Tyler, Gabe, Caleb, Oladipo, Strus, Dedmon, and Keith. And if you just play the starters, let's say 30 minutes, which you're not going to play, they're going to play more in the playoffs.
Right.
That's not enough minutes to get all those guys.
Well, and Tyler is ostensibly a starter.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the way it was put to me was that 4 guys are going to always get their minutes, and I don't know why they didn't mention a 5th because I think PJ does too. But it was said that basically Bam, Jimmy, and Kyle. They've only played 14 games together the whole season. But they're all, and then the 4th that was mentioned to me, but was Tyler. Like they are viewing Tyler as essentially a de facto starter, even if he's not starting. So if you do that, then you're really talking about 6 guys for 3 spots, right? Essentially.
And if you're squeezing anybody's minutes, like you said, Bam, PJ, Jimmy, and Kyle, you're not squeezing their minutes. Right. Tyler, even when Tyler is shot terrible, they're not squeezing his minutes.
No, he plays them anyway.
So who are you taking minutes from? And the person is Duncan. I mean,
right.
you may take minutes away from Duncan and maybe not give them the Strus, but then you're putting Caleb on the floor or Oladipo on the floor or Gabe on the floor, or maybe increasing the minutes of those other guards, Kyle or Tyler. I mean, that's just the way it's going to shake out. And how do you avoid that? Duncan, go out there and make shots. Like that's the truth. And don't get hunted on defense. If you can do that, your minutes will stay consistent. Otherwise, look at all these guys I have on the bench. I have all these options. Why wouldn't I go to them?
But the one thing that's not going to happen, and I go back again to the question I asked of Riley before the season, which kind of his answer, which stunned me, kind of tipped people off to how Pat feels about this, which we had heard a little bit, that it was more Spo than Pat who wanted to retain Duncan, particularly at that price. And again, the question I asked him was, I said, Duncan wants to, told us, it was right after media day. And he had said, I had asked Duncan, I said, closing games, is that a priority for you? And he says, it's something that I would like to do. Obviously he wanted to be worthy of it. It wasn't like he was demanding the role or this isn't a controversy, but I basically mentioned that to Pat. Pat says, well, he can go close on a bad team. Which again was one of those answers that I feel like if Pat could have it back, he probably would take it back. And he started to backtrack during the question, but then also said Tyler does more things. There's more versatile offensively. Okay. But it just seems like there's no chance that really happens for Duncan, right? Like, I mean, he would have to be having a nuclear game. And even if he is, I feel like this will swing the other way where Spoelstra won't use him in those situations. And the fans will be like, why'd you take Duncan? Well, maybe they might not get quite there, but some might. Why'd you take Duncan out? He hit 6 threes.
Yeah, I think the value of the first 36 minutes is still there. So he's going to have those opportunities, but you have all the evidence over the last couple of years. You're not going to close with him. And the reason you're not going to close with him, even if he's shooting the ball well, is the defensive problems.
Yeah, Hunting.
And he's not nearly as bad as some people make it seem. But again, if you're looking down the bench and you've got a healthy Oladipo, you've got Gabe, you've got Caleb, you've got, even Tyler, which I wouldn't put in the group of those other guys, but like more capable defenders. and ball handling. That's the other thing. It's not just
Yeah.
defense. Duncan
Because
can't handle
Strus
the
gives
ball.
you that. Strus gives you that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the game, you need guys out there that can handle the ball. And that's oftentimes why you size down. And Duncan just doesn't provide that. And so it's not because he's a bad player. It's just that's how end of game situations work. Those types of guys often get played off the floor. Now, if you're down 3 and you need a 3, he's going to be on the floor. If you need a stop, he's not going to be on the floor.
So let's look at Oladipo here, because I mean, he's been around the team. He's been active in terms of his support in a way I don't think he was in the short period of time last year. Seems like he's integrated quite a bit more with the team. We know what the skill set is, provided that the quad is right. Okay. But there's also going to be some rust. And he's not a particularly good shooter to begin. I mean, I wouldn't say he's a bad shooter, but he's not a consistent 3-point shooter. He's a shot maker. He's like, I remember this conversation I had with Dwayne and LeBron, where they wouldn't call themselves shooters. They even on a night that LeBron would have 4 threes, right? He'd look over at JJ or at Mike Miller or even Shane Ray, obviously, and say, those are shooters. We're shot makers. Oladipo has gotten on runs from the outside. I mean, he can make outside shots, but he's pretty much a 33 to 35% at best 3-point shooter. What do you do with him if he comes back rusty? Because his shot, I mean, people are forgetting, like, he showed some athleticism, some flashes last year, and definitely some defense in the 4 games he played, but he was not good offensively. Their numbers with him offensively in those 4 games were not good. So how long is the rope here, so to speak?
I don't think it's very long, because first of all, you're not committed to him long term, and you're not committed to him with a lot of money either. It's a 1-year minimum deal. I mean, so you're if he doesn't work out, you have plenty of options elsewhere. So, I think the other difference is this year you have Kyle Lowry. You're not so starved for a point guard, and Oladipo really isn't a point guard either, but he was the best real option we had last year in a lot of cases. So, I think he's best suited being on the weak side, have the defense broken down, and now he's attacking a defense that's already kind of shifted. He's very good at getting downhill, use him as a cutter. And I think not just with him, but with all these guys coming back and roles changing drastically, there's going to be rust in general with the Heat. Like, it's a blessing to get these guys back, but there's going to be an adjustment period when these guys get back. And thankfully, we have an easier schedule. We have a lot of home games that can help us get through that too.
All right, so let's one more sponsor to mention. We're going to close here with Sean. Go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5 FIVE over at prizepicks.com. Get your initial deposit matched. Put down $100. They're going to give you $100 to play with. You don't need to play it all at once. You don't have to just play NBA either. Play NHL. You can play. I don't think Kodak Black was on the board yesterday, but who knows? I was at the Panther Cave. Took the wrong video. When MLB comes back, you can play that too. And of course, NCAA is over, but you can play the NFL with the playoff games coming up this weekend. So go to prizepicks.com, use the code 5 FIVE, get your initial deposit matched. All right, Sean, let's do a quick East thing here. The Nets. I feel like there's a perception, maybe nationally, Kyrie comes back and everything is fixed. I just don't like the team they've put around them, right? Like they don't. They look like a second round exit to me. Unless Durant goes completely nuclear, Wade 2006 like, you're not getting it from Harden in the playoffs to that level. And again, the Kyrie situation, but also they have all their bigs were like borderline star level players before. They're not role guys. Okay. I mean, they're not other than Claxton, they're not dirty work guys. Are you afraid of the Nets?
No, I don't think defensively they're a team that can hang. I mean, it's I've watched a couple of their games. I watched a recent one where they lost to Portland, a team that we just beat up on. I mean, they just let Anthony Simons go off, and they don't have the, like, that PJ Tucker type guy that can go out there and defend. Like last year, it was kind of Bruce Brown from Miami. Day'Ron Sharp, he plays hard. He's a good young kid, but like, that's the guy you're afraid of. And then the older veteran post players, like you said, if Kevin Durant doesn't go off, or if you get a Kyrie or James Harden explosion, like, who's beating you? And they just don't, they're not tied together defensively enough for me to fear them. Like, you look at Milwaukee, a team that plays very, together and cohesive. we play very together, cohesive.
Right.
The Nets just don't show that. And you can kind of see like the frustration on Kevin Durant. Like he's getting 20 points, I think, in like 32 or 33 out of their 34 games. And it's like,
losing.
Where's my help? Yeah.
Well, they're a mercenary outfit to me. But again, the 05-06 Heat were a mercenary outfit, but they were also coached by Pat Riley and also Dwayne went nuts. But I mercenary outfits typically don't work. Like LeBron and Dwayne and Chris came together because of a friendship, but also because of the organizational structure. There were a lot of reasons that they came together. These guys just came together because like Brooklyn was open. Like it's, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, okay, I mean, that's a place we can kind of create something. There's no history there. There's no structure there. I don't see it.
And we're a top 5-6 defense. And the teams that scare me are like the Warriors, the Suns, the Grizzlies, where the ball moves and players move. The Nets, when they do that, are very tough. When they don't do that, and it's just clear out one-on-one with Harden, one-on-one with Durant. Yes, they're going to get buckets because they're very good players. But over the course of 7 games or 5 games, I just don't see that being the recipe to beat the Heat's defense.
I'll say this, of the lower level East teams, we're gonna let Sean go. Charlotte's the one that impresses me a little bit. I think it's a matchup that would concern me a little bit. I know people are talking Cleveland for Miami as being a matchup concern you, but Charlotte looks like they're kind of getting things together, and I think they're well coached. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. We appreciate Sean S. Rochester NBA. You can also find him on the Biscayne Bay Brewing account, which of course is the official beer, the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and hosting Pace and Spaces. I'll be on there tonight at halftime.
You're subbing in for me. Struce is starting for me. Yeah,
I am Struce for your Robinson tonight. So there you go. I'll be in for you later today, and of course, before floor, an hour before every game with the usual crew. We'll try to be on time. And then post up 5R as soon as the game ends. Royal Shepherd is back, so you don't have to deal with me on that one. And a new 5 on the floor with me and Greg and likely Alex after the game. Have a good day, everybody.